In 5, 4, 3, 2.
Am I looking at you or them? All right, cool.
Go.
All right, so Mike, your LinkedIn bio reads co-founder, CEO Monument, co-founder, former CEO PaintZen, acquired by PPG, which for those who don't know is a $30 billion market cap, Fortune 500 company, co-founder ZipDrug, exit Anthem, as in Blue Cross, co-founder MyClean, exit Surge Private Equity, co-founder Bombas, which is basically Warby Parker, for underwear started by your co-founder, our mutual friend, David. That's the sexy dream side of the story. We want to hear about the nightmares, the startup version of Tim Burton's Nightmare Before Christmas that no one talks about. You said to me last week in a conversation we were having about one of these stories that you felt like, you didn't say this, my words, Teflon done, like all of these crazy things happen to you, but you always come out the other side, but not before incurring a massive amount of pain in the process. So those are the things we want to talk about. We want to hear like in detail, so we know feel your pain and also your relief when you come out the other side. So let's start in chronological order, which I think is MyClean, which I remember when we met was when you were starting PaintZen and you were still running MyClean. So let's talk about that company, the first company, and what the exit looked like and how you were managing both MyClean and PaintZen at the same time.
Yeah, so I can take you through it. There's actually one before that I left off my LinkedIn because I tanked it. But that was called VenueTap, so I put my whole life savings into that. It never even launched, but that was my education and I guess what not to do in tech startups, which led me to MyClean in 2009. So
your whole life savings and didn't even get to launch?
Never launched. I overbuilt the product. I tried to build OpenTable for nightlife on the first edition of the iPad and outsourced all the software work to India.
Interesting.
Yes. Yeah, a lot of lessons learned.
So that was your MBA, basically?
That was my MBA,
yeah.
Correct.
Hopefully it was cheaper than an MBA. Hopefully it was cheaper than my MBA.
I don't know if it was. Yeah. Probably around the same price.
Yeah, well, probably more memorable.
Yeah,
than
for sure.
I learned in a textbook or a case study. So then, and you were brave enough to go into MyClean broke.
Yeah, so I was a nightclub promoter at the time. I came out of college, took a job at Citibank. I was making $40,000 a year in the early 2000s, and I couldn't afford to live in Manhattan, so I started promoting nightclubs once a week. And I was making more money promoting nightclubs once a week than I was in my job, so I said thank you to my parents for my college education, become a full-time nightclub promoter. And I'd saved some money. I'd started VenueTap. I'd lost all my money. And then I saved back up, and I wasn't going to stop at that point because I just invested in all those learnings. So I had an idea for the ability to book a home cleaner, just the click of a button and pay. I was struggling, honestly. I was young, I had a lot of parties, and I could never get a cleaner to show up, ever. I'd leave the cash on the table, they'd never show up. So I just wanted to make it simple. I built the platform. I built it in a really simple way. I didn't overbuild. That was my key learning from VenueTap. Went on Craigslist. My co-founder, who lived across the hall from me, found 2 cleaners, and we put the site live, and we got written up on a blog called Thrillist. Remember Thrillist?
Yeah, I do remember Thrillist.
We got 400 customers in the first day with 2 cleaners, and that was it. That was the first sale, I guess, I ever made, on the internet, and we scrambled, and a lot of people were upset when we couldn't meet their appointments, but, we got it together, and then kind of everything took off from there. That was the start.
Fake it till you make it. I remember my co-founder, Pete, from Trillia, had started the largest travel site in Europe, and he was like, we took orders in fax machines because there was no website. The website was just like a form that you look pretty.
Yeah.
That's how you fake it till you make it, not overbuild.
Yeah, I think that was a key learning. It's like people don't really see what's happening behind the scenes.
Yeah.
They just see the front experience. So if you build that, it seems nice. You kind of have a mess, you just clean it up on the back end until you kind of put it all together and you can scale it.
Yeah. So, if you go back to the experience of having lost all your money, fortunately, you didn't have dependents, kids, and you were young, and so that's easier to bounce back from. But how did you remember that emotional experience?
I'll never forget it in my life. So I think I had saved between maybe just over 100,000 or maybe it's 200,000. It was significant for me.
This is early 2000, right?
I did really well in nightclub promoting. I really had a great business, more birthday party bookings, corporate events. It was years of work, and I just remember when I pulled the plug on VenueTap, I was on the corner of 23rd Street and 7th Avenue. And in my brain, I was just like, my life is over. And that moment I always have, because fast forward, my life wasn't over. So every time I'm in the trenches now and I get that this is never going to work, it's over for me. I think back to that moment. I was, 27 years old, and it seemed like it was over, but it was just the beginning. So that's like motivation for me now,
Totally.
going forward. But I'll never forget that. I was just staring up at the sky in the middle of New York City, and I didn't see any hope for me after that. And there ended up being a lot of hope.
How long was it between that and starting MyClean?
So I think I pulled the plug on that in 2007, and we launched MyClean in 2009. So I'd saved up more money.
Right? Just gone back to work.
Back to work in the nightclubs, built back up, and everything I had saved, I'm like doubling down. And I had a couple of buddies throw in some money. I think it was a total investment of like $40,000 or $60,000 into the company between myself and a few friends, and that was it. That was the beginning of my visible tech career.
How long into MyClean did you continue to do the nightclub promotion?
So it went for a while. So I ran, at the time, I didn't even know what venture capital was. I didn't understand really how to raise money. That was a new experience for me through PaintZen. So I ran it until it just was too big. There was no salary for me. So I had a buddy. I needed someone to run it because I couldn't run the company, and I needed a salary, so I needed to stay with nightclub promoting. So about a year in, a good friend of mine wanted to get out of his finance job. He had actually, like a smart person, kept his savings, so he was able to take some risk.
Yeah.
So he agreed to come on. He took over as CEO in 2010. I moved to chairman position on the board, and he ran the company into to an exit, which was I think last year, the year before, to surge. We lost 90% of our sales from Q1 in 2020 to Q2. So we're doing about
because of COVID.
Went from 2.5 million in sales in Q1 to 250,000 in sales in Q2. And then we still got a nice exit actually, and ended up being a great buyer who's done right by us. So.
That's great.
Yeah.
And there was a comeback for them, a comeback investment, right, for them, recovery.
Yeah. So they merged us recently with, I don't know if it's public, but maybe, with Busy Bee. So they had a larger cleaning company that they acquired MyClean, and they recently put them together.
Do you think I imagine doing the nightclub promoting while starting MyClean gave you, to overcome, you used to get hit to your confidence when you're put a company to bed, which I've done a couple times.
Yeah.
But it must have been easier the second time because I'm sure, you're like, well, if it doesn't work with MyClean, I'll just keep promoting, right? I'm not going to do the 100% all in. But do you recommend that? It's sort of like a plan B, which people tell you shouldn't have.
Yeah. I mean, I have a choice, right? If I'm not making money, I'm on a park bench. Yeah. So I have to make money. So I had to figure out how to keep making money to live while also growing these tech companies. Fortunately, I had an amazing network, really close friends. People were really interested from, jumping into tech startups at the time, but they were, in different industries. So, that's the theme, right, throughout my entire career. The one theme of my success or where I've had success is just working with the best people, like finding the best people, getting the best people around. Like that's the ingredient for me. So
we met when early on at PaintZen. I don't remember how we met. Do you remember who it was?
I think we were introduced, maybe was it David Lerner, maybe? David Lerner introduced us?
Maybe.
Yeah, he's a very good friend of mine still.
He's an investor of ours, actually.
He's an investor in 2 of my companies right now.
Good guy.
Best.
You were early on. I remember your office was pretty modest.
Yes, to say the least.
And you took that to what seemed like, helped raise a little bit of money, but it seemed like it went pretty quick, and you had this great exit. You went from residential painting on demand to commercial, which was probably a big boon to the business. Was there a lot of pain in that experience?
Oh, unexplainable pain. I think I've come to a point in my life where I've just gotten really comfortable in chaos and really disastrous situations. My state of comfort, so I've adjusted over time. I'd say that, that low point with VenueTap has kind of like made me, be able to deal with it. But PaintZen, I said to myself, I really wanted out of nightlife. That was the key. I wanted out, and I had researched about venture capital. I got introduced to Quotidian Ventures, right? And they were going to invest in very early in PaintZen, $250,000, I think it was. And I said to myself, I already did it with MyClean. Someone else is running it. I'll just go do it again with painting. They invested 250,000, and then we get introduced from there to Tomas Corte, right? Who the founder of AngelPad, and his wife Corrine. They run it together. They're amazing, and we go through this program. And we were probably the most mature company in the program. We were launched. We had revenue, but that was kind of my bridge into real venture capital.
Incubator.
It was an incubator, right? But that 250,000 let me take a salary. So that was my official jump out of nightlife, right? So now had this weird kind of incubator of myself forming where I had MyClean, someone else running it. I'm in this accelerator, AngelPad, and we went to demo day. We flew to Silicon Valley, and that was the most eye-awakening experience of my life. I'll tell you, we were the top company in the accelerator. I had MyClean, which was growing, and I viewed myself at the time before I got to Silicon Valley as an epic technology startup founder. I got there, delivered with confidence on demo day. I went out, I probably was there for 6 weeks. I might have taken 50 to 75 meetings. I raised a total of $50,000 from one investor.
Wow.
I never got so many no's in my life. I was bragging about how great MyClean was, and I realized that me thinking that was a win was actually hurting me.
Yeah.
And that was it. I kind of paused, and you ever see the show Silicon Valley on HBO?
Show, yeah.
Okay, so
Patrick and I were talking about that yesterday. Yeah.
that was key. This is kind of crazy, but remember the episode that goes, your logo looks like an upside down vagina. Your muffins taste like you have to insult them. I'm like, this shit's not working. I got to stop talking about the business. I watched that episode. I came back to New York. I stopped pitching the business. And I obviously didn't tell them their logo looked like an upside down vagina, but I went in and I just played the game. I played the whole game. Oversubscribed the round in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, in New York. And
Not dating, by the way. It's the
speed dating.
Pretend you don't want them or like them or think they're pretty.
Correct.
Right?
Correct. I had, there's always one investor, I think probably in everyone's career, at least mine, that believes in you early, right? The lead on our round was a guy named Taylor Green, who's now at 12 Below. He was at Lyra Hippo at the time. He believed. He believed in me, and once he believed, everyone else believed. And Taylor actually, coincidentally, has been on a board of my company for the past 10 years.
Oh, wow.
From start to exit at PaintZen, and then from start up until yesterday at Monument when we closed our B. He finally is no longer, he was a seed investor, so he dropped off and the lead from the B took the seat, but he's been my number one. He's probably the greatest investor and human being I've ever met.
You always have to have those people in your corner and on your board who always have your back.
Always. I mean, he's really diamond in the rough.
So was that the roughest time at PaintZen when you got those humbling?
Oh no,
50?
That was a cakewalk.
Any near-death experiences worth?
There's a couple. So, we launch and we're moving and, I didn't even know really how to evaluate unit economics or anything at the time. But every investor passed for the same reason. This is what I realized about investors. They're really smart. So if you see patterns of passes, they're usually right, right? So I got passes on all the one-time use case. One-time use case can't work. I'm thinking to myself, it's going to be fine, One-time use case does not work. They were all correct, right? We had built an incredible experience. So what we had at PaintZen when we launched it, we were growing, but we made a sliver of profit on each transaction.
The acquisition costs were probably too high.
Acquisition costs were high. We never saw the customer again. They painted one every 10 years.
Yeah.
So I knew I was going to have trouble with my Series A and I needed to kind of do something different. So I thought, based on MyClean, where are people painting a lot? And that's where we started to think about national retailers. Paints a lot. Somebody at Gap has to have hundreds of stores painted every day. So we kind of repackaged our technology. We started showing up at facility management events all over the country, and we were booking, within a year maybe, we had 20 of the top 100 retailers on the platform, which ultimately led to our exit. I think it was $65 million to PPG. But between the time I kind of bridged that gap between consumer to commercial and our Series A, Bullpen Capital came in. They saw the vision. Bullpen Capital's Paul Martino. Yeah. He only looks at spreadsheets. He's a genius. He doesn't need a deck or anything. Send me your model. He saw it. He saw the commercial thing, and his money went in. I had 1 week left till my next payroll, and I couldn't make the payroll if he didn't invest in time. I think he got in 5 days before the money. Yeah. And that was it. From there, it was smooth until obviously the acquisition was also nerve-wracking, but
Paul's thesis is that very point in time in between rounds when you're close but not close enough, and that works out well for him too. Exactly, my neighbor.
He's able to see. He's able to see things that others can't. I guess. Yeah.
So he's also got the my favorite attribute of a good investor, which is they've been in, and they know it's empathy.
Yeah.
Right? So how long between exiting Paint Zen and starting Monument?
So it's funny, Monument. I guess my experience that led to Monument was happening during Paint Zen. So I have a lot of issues in my life. I'm 18, I was diagnosed with cancer, right? I was about to go to college, and all of a sudden I have a golf ball sticking out of my neck. So, I was an athlete in high school, and instead of going to college with all my friends, I checked into a hospital, and I got diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And then I went through 6 or 8 weeks of chemotherapy, lost all my hairs. And when I finally got to school, I was traumatized. I started drinking a lot, and I was partying a lot. And then I went into nightclub promoting. So my thing was, I always wanted to get out of nightlife because I just wanted to stop that drinking, partying pattern. But when I went officially into Paint Zen, I guess my patterns shifted. They didn't go away. So I became like a trigger drinker, like a binge drinker, right? I barely drank, but once a month, once every other week, once every 2 months, I would go to dinner with friends, and I would tell myself the same thing. I'll have one drink. Never. I tracked it. I fell 30 times in a row. And it would always trigger, like someone talking about like a bachelor party, some fun memory I had would get me to the one drink thing. So while I was running Paint Zen, I was also simultaneously trying to just stop this pattern. And when I figured out I couldn't do it on my own, I literally went to AA, right? And I love huge AA fan. Like, I have many people around me that have had success and probably might not be here without AA. But I realized when I went to AA, I'm like, I'm a different cohort. I'm a different stage. Like, if you think about cancer, I was stage 2, right? I was probably stage 1 or 2. If you think about alcohol, use disorder or drinking. Everyone around me was stage 5. People there disconnected from, like, they took in AA 90 minutes and 90 days. That really worked well for them. I might not even drink in the next 90 days. So I was figuring out this whole kind of situation, and I uncovered medication through a friend, actually. I got desperate. I tried everything. Like, a friend told me he called it the puke pill. I take the puke pill, and if I drink on it, I'll throw up and get sick. So that's helped me stop drinking. So I was like, fuck it. Called my doctor. They prescribed me the puke pill. I started taking it. Next time I went out to dinner, I can't drink. I can't even have one drink. It's off the table. So I figured that out. There's the importance of therapy there. But, I stopped drinking, and then, that's kind of like a weight off your leg, right? It's like, now I feel like a superhero because I've been doing all this with this whole drinking thing. That's when I exited Paint Zen. I did my earn out at PPG. I think it was about a year. And then I went to look for my next idea. And I have an idea list I keep in Google Docs. I just write things down. They're not even ideas. Like, things that I don't understand, things that annoy me. Some are ideas, some are good, bad. And one of them was like, why does no one know about this medication? And boom, 2018, I started to think about Monument. I dug in, I did my research, started there.
The alcohol, you said, was the trigger. You were a trigger drinker, I think you said. It sounded like the trigger was fun triggers, like,
It's like memories, yeah. It's like I'm in a good environment, exactly.
But you're also running a company which has the ups and the roller coaster that we all talk about, which I think when people hear about sounds exciting. But in fact, the low lows aren't exciting at all. Were those moments in Paint Zen also triggers for you?
No, I oddly didn't trigger in tough moments. I think they were so hard, my brain knew I needed to be all there, I triggered mostly in fun where I let my guard down, right? So, when I got into tough moments, I always stayed really on point, and that never happened. Now I'm always kind of on point because I don't know how to put it, but I'm not off point because of alcohol, right? So, but I was good in the low moments. That's really where I kept it together.
So fair to say Paint Zen and MyClean were very pragmatic, practical. I have a problem, an itch to scratch, right? But Monument was a mission, right?
Correct. Yeah, I mean, we were with, in hindsight, Paint Zen and Monument were easier. I mean, Paint Zen and MyClean were easier than Monument, right? We were just taking something people are already doing and we're making it easier. Yeah. That's all. Monument was like a totally new kind of technology or platform. I was looking at it in 2018. I mean, I go through my check boxes. I do I try to do the most diligence on these companies more than any investor would ever do because I'm putting my own life into it, right? So I knew a couple of things about healthcare because I was one of the co-founders of ZipDrug. I founded it. I never operated it, but I had a lot of exposure to it. So I had a basic knowledge. I knew the importance of health plans, right? So I knew with health plans, we needed to be addressing a cost and we needed to show we could reduce that cost. And that cost really needed to matter to health plans and employers. Otherwise, there would be no relationship there. And if I had a business that was dependent upon a health plan relationship, I needed to be sure I could execute, right? So when I did my research on Monument, I found a stat in 2010, right? So I was looking at it in 2018. Last study was 2010. $250 billion a year economic cost in the US, right? Mostly lost work productivity.
For alcohol.
For alcohol specifically. It was treatment, lost work productivity. So there was a big piece there. At the time, it was, this was before we went into quarantine, right? So like mostly health was delivered like B2B. Not many were going D2C. Investors didn't love D2C. But I'm thinking to myself, no employee is going to want to go to their employer and talk about this, right? I think we got to go D2C and we got to do it on a cash pay basis, obviously. People have to pay out of pocket until we're able to get coverage. The couple of conviction points I thought about. Number one, the baseline we were up against was it cost $2,200 for an insurance company to cover treatment for somebody in a month. And after 34 days, the benchmark for success was 10%.
Is this like AA treatment?
Not AA, like actual treatment, like insurance covered treatment. So going to a center, right? That means $2,200 cost. My assumption they're probably covering a 30-day kind of rehab thing. Some outpatient, inpatient. And then 4 days after the 30 days, at day 34, only 10% of people that went in were still engaged in treatment. That's how outcomes seem to be tracked. I'm thinking to myself, even if we suck, we're going to be way better than that, right? The second piece was like, no one's ever going to use it. How are you going to get people to use it? They don't even know the medication. No one knew the medications. No one even knows it. I'm thinking to myself, I'm desperate. I was desperate. I was so desperate. I would have tried anything for $200 at the time. I have that case study in my brain. So I'm thinking we put it out there, get in front of the right people, do a whole community education piece, trust building. People will use it, and I know it'll work because it worked for me. And I knew we could deliver it virtually because these are safe medications. You see a physician, we're not in the controlled substance game. These are generic, they've been around forever, FDA approved, on-label use. They are super safe, which was crazy that nobody knew about them. So we got to a physician, if it made sense. We stayed out of the transaction. There's no money there anyway. They sent it right to the local pharmacy, and then we layered in therapy and a whole bunch of groups and community engagement and education. Today we have, I've had 10,000 people in paid treatment. We have 75,000 in our community. At 34 days, 95% of people are still taking actin treatment in Monument at $200 instead of $2,200. And it was a subscription. And now we're moving away because we've signed in 4 major national contracts, 230 million people under insurance. You can use insurance for Monument right now. You'll pay copay, which is pretty cool. So, the alcohol became a major focus for employers and health plans. It was amazing because it was becoming a big problem. So now everybody's kind of behind it, hope to lead that charge. And Monument works. It really works. So that's the best part.
When you started that company, it was obviously very personal for you and mission driven. Sort of a taboo subject a little bit. How did investors respond to that? From the very beginning, like the Series A, seed?
Honestly, like I had 6 investors in Painten I built really wonderful relationships with. That was my seed. Yeah. They backed me. Like, even if they didn't genuinely understand it, because maybe I didn't even understand it fully at the time, unconditional backing and support from them. So without that group, we never get there. Honestly, now the whole personal story, it's great. I use it. I use it as much as I can. It lowers the barrier. What I start to realize when I introduce that story, people get comfortable and they tell me their stories. Everybody's affected in some way, if not personally, by someone around them. And, this is one of those few businesses in healthcare where a legendary DECA unicorn business follows an amazing mission. A lot of healthcare companies, I think, don't succeed because there's no business beyond the mission. Right. This one's both.
Right. So the most recent nightmare that you've had that we're not going to actually be able to publish for quite some time.
Yeah, maybe we shoot a part 2.
Until you're, part 2.
Yeah.
On the other side of was also fundraising for Monument, your Series B. Not related at all to the mission that you were on or the business, but just happenstance of shit going wrong that you couldn't see happening. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Maybe a little. Do you want to do a part 2 filming?
Yeah, we can do it. I mean,
Yeah.
we can talk
I could touch it. I could tee it up, but basically, I think the market is probably, since I've been doing this, the worst I've ever seen. I mean, it's really challenging, and I think that leads to some different behaviors, from all sorts of partners, operators, investors, than I've ever seen before. The desperate times call for desperate measures. So I'd say the most challenging part of my entire career was probably last week, and we almost basically, I was 2 days away from having to wind the company down. And prior to that, on Wednesday, I had to wind down on Friday. We got funded for our Series B. And that was supposed to happen months prior, but it didn't.
Yeah. By the way, the blog post that I wrote that you read, I don't know that I said this, but we were hours away from doing what's called an ABC, right? Which is basically turning the company into, turning it over basically for someone to wind it down. And the whole thing reversed and turned around. Worst experience of my life. I talked to my co-founder, Jamie. We were reminiscing about it yesterday. We're like, never want to be there again. It really, circumstances really let you sweat it out till the really end. And you start really looking deep inside yourself. And
yeah.
It is a surreal part of it that you're almost like living outside of yourself and having to just
Yeah, you escalate. Your body goes into some mode, I mean, listen, 2 days is an eternity compared to a few hours. So I can't
Plus,
imagine.
I think when you're in the eye of the storm, it's like fight or flight takes over. My board was like, you're handling this really amazing. And yeah, talk to me in like a month.
Yeah.
And sure enough, I really, and once it all was done, so you let go.
Mm-hmm.
It took me a couple months to recover from that.
I think I'm all right. I think. It sounds like your experiences might have been more traumatic than mine.
Yeah.
But
also, any near-death experience, right? When you have everything on the line, everyone's faith and trust in you, and circumstances outside of your control, which was our circumstances too, and you're like, holy shit.
It's crazy. It's even when the Paints and sale was my first sale, it was my first exit. My daughter was living in a closet. I converted to a bedroom at the time. And I was being directed, and rightly so, to turn down offers. I was getting great advice, by the way, and I should have turned down a few more because I think I could have probably left a lot of money on the table. But when that ended and it signed and that money hit my account, everyone thinks, oh, you're celebrating? I burnt out. I couldn't even move. I was so done. I didn't care about anything. It's just it hits you after it all ends and closes, even if it closes well. You just kind of give your brain lets down. You're just burnt. It's over, So I didn't even really enjoy that moment much. Just happy to be through it.
Yeah, I think people look at this from the outside. By the way, Patrick, who we're seeing a little while, told us yesterday when he sold RightsFlow, which is his first company, to Google, he was literally 2 days away from personal bankruptcy. He said, I had $3,000 in the bank, and my monthly nut was $10,000. My wife and I, and all of their savings, 401ks, all of it were in the company.
I had $8,000 in my bank account. I had 2 kids, and they have a corporate development team at PPG. Yeah. So I was outclassed. I mean, they were buying a company for $2.6 billion. I think it might have even fallen through, which made them more angry. I got destroyed in there. They ran me down to no money. I had to sign things. They took all my funding options off the table, and now it's just me and them, and I get an offer so low, and I'm so excited because in hindsight, it was low. I think it was $30 million or something. It was the first offer. My board goes, no, just say no and walk away. It's I don't have anywhere to go. There's nowhere to walk. So I said no. It's they came back at 50. And, I don't know how long I can talk, but there's one speech I got from a board member I'll never forget in my entire life. I'm happy to tell it. I call him up. I'm in San Francisco. My co-founder is more nervous than I am. And I go, we got to take 50. We got to take 50. We can't take it anymore. This is it, right? My life goes a very different direction if this deal doesn't go through. I don't know if I go into bankruptcy, but I might. And he goes, let me tell you this story. His name is Scott Savitz from Data Point. He called this acquisition to a T within $1. Every step of the way, it was like he was on the other side of the emails and phone calls. It was legendary. Let me tell you a story about this guy that works in an ice cream shop in Nantucket. I'm in Nantucket at a house there. I take my daughter. I'm like, what is this guy talking about? And I take my daughter, you know, and my son, and my daughter's and son, we go to the ice cream shop, and my daughter loves chocolate ice cream. So she gets 2 scoops of this like special chocolate ice cream, and this guy scoops it out. And the ice cream's like really hard. He's like got ice cream all over his wrist and stuff. And, you know, she wants 2 scoops, so then he does it again, and like we're so excited to be here. We go, we pay, you know, and I drop $1 in like the tip jar. He's like, that guy's life sucks. Your life is fine. You're negotiating a $60 million deal. Stop complaining. Reject 50. They'll probably come back between 60 and 70, and I'll let you say yes, but just know they'd probably pay 100. Turns out they would have paid 150, but I took 65, and he was spot on, and that was the craziest story I've ever heard, and we talk about that all the time.
I think this is the value. There's a book, The Art of Not Giving a Fuck, which sort of brought that guy to fame. But I didn't even have to read that book. The Art of Not Giving a Fuck is just having options.
You need options. I don't have an option. He's sitting there in Nantucket. Like, I'm like sitting in a hotel room thinking to myself, but you know, he was right. It's like, what I learned from that is if a company wants to buy you, number one, it's less likely to happen if you take the first offer. Something looks suspicious. Number two is nobody ever walks over negotiating. They just negotiate. So like, you have to be comfortable. I also have to get perspective. $1 to me is not $1 to them. It's a $30 billion company. Yeah. $100 million is like me giving you $1. So like, I didn't have that perspective. I have it now. That allowed me. I acquired a company with Monument, and I kind of used some of that learning to get that deal done, which was an amazing acquisition, amazing company we were able to acquire.
I saw that.
Yeah, really amazing company.
Awesome. So we'll do the part 2 about the night before, right before Christmas, because Christmas is it's Christmas morning. You're in the middle of this round now that almost didn't get done, right? And so you're halfway there.
Halfway there. Well, you know, a lot has been set up. I guess halfway there financially, but I think, you know, in theory, we're closer to close now.
By the time we do the second part of this, the story will probably be public, because my guess is it's going to be hard for that person to keep it from being public.
I hope not. I hope not really, because I don't want the company to be associated with any negativity at all, you know, and like I said, there's a lot of hearsay in it. So, you know, I think it's better off if everybody just stays positive, works together, focuses on why we're here, which is the company Monument, you know, so that's the most important to me.
To your point about the bad behavior in this environment where money is really scarce, and, you know, even if you're a good company, good, not great, even if you're a good company and things are, you know, you're bucking sort of macroeconomic climate, you're going to take a down round if you took money in the last couple of years because the valuations were insane, right? And then the question is, like, how much leverage do you have? And how painful is it? Is it just a price thing? Ratchets and all the stuff that you don't know what will come of it. There was a story in Forbes that I read this morning about Shark Tank and how most of the deals they get done end up not getting funded. The sharks change the terms. They let months go by, notify the entrepreneur, and let them like run out of money, which I think is horrendous.
Yeah, I don't think those are not official deals.
Yeah. Not only that, but they make them sign exclusivity agreements once they go on the show that they won't take money from anyone else.
Wow.
And they make them wait. And sometimes they just write 4 months later, sorry, we're out.
Listen, it's called Shark Tank for a reason. Dealing with the sharks.
But you know, like, they are entrepreneurs, so for an entrepreneur to treat another entrepreneur like that is just, to me, like, unfathomable.
Yeah, you know, it's a tough world. It's the end story. You know, you only see the good ones typically. You don't see the bad ones, and there's not a glamorous story, you know, behind the good ones either. So it's just hard. It's hard. Otherwise, everyone else would do it.
Well, why? This is a good question. You made money on Paintzen. You could have, you know, had a couple of generational of wealth, right? Why keep doing it? And by the way, what we're also not talking about is this other company that you're baking. Why keep starting companies?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm good at operating companies. I'm horribly bad at negotiating my equity positions. So, you know, I'd 4 exits over the course of 3 years, 3 through acquisition, 1 through a secondary. I was probably a much smaller shareholder than I would be if I knew what I knew today. That said, I'm just happy about how it turned out. So, on paper, the value of the exit is not the amount of money that goes into the founder's pocket. I think people might not realize that. And I honestly didn't really know how to manage money. I never had money. I don't come from money. So I had 2 hardworking parents gave me a wonderful life, but I didn't have a trust fund. So I never had large. So all of a sudden it's a windfall,
Yeah.
So, it caused a lot of problems, challenges for me in my personal life. And honestly, when I was comfortable, I was miserable. I was depressed. If I'm walking along the beach on a sunny day and the wind's blowing and birds are chirping, I will be in depression. That sounds horrifying to me. So I leveled up. What's harder? What's bigger? It's how can I tackle this? I stopped doing things that already existed and making it easier. I started inventing totally new things, tackling the hardest spaces I could think of. Healthcare, consumer, right? So I have my next journey ahead of me, and I wake up sweating and panicking, and I'm scared every day, and I'm the happiest I've ever been.
I think you have the same disease that most entrepreneurs, including me, have, which is having a hard time sitting still and enjoying things like sitting on the beach. I hate sitting on the beach. There's nothing. I like driving by and living near it and looking at it. I would not want to sit on it. It just drives me bananas.
Yeah, it's hard. I need challenges in my brain to figure out.
There's the movie that I think of when I think about why entrepreneurs that do multiple companies do it, especially the ones that have made a lot of money. It's Point Break. So it's Keanu Reeves and Patrick Swayze.
Classic.
Yeah, he's like a bank robber, right?
Mm-hmm.
Keanu Reeves is an undercover FBI agent, and they're surfing. He surfs around the world. They surf bank robbers, president. Anyway, Keanu Reeves at some point says, "You have all this money. Why do you keep robbing banks?" He's like, "It's the adrenaline, man."
Yeah, it's adrenaline. What time is it right now? Sorry, I'm on camera.
10:30.
Oh, good. Okay.
Okay, we started.
Perfect. I got an 11. I can't miss. That's on camera. We can edit that, right?
Yeah, that's totally.
Okay, perfect. I can say whatever I want now. This is amazing. I can give you a little bit of how we launched Monument. It's a pretty cool story.
Yeah, do it.
So, I don't know, do you want to ask the question and then I come in, or do I just talk about it?
Yeah, well, we talked about it. We could just edit it back into how what's the best story you have at Monument?
Yeah, so I think a lot of these companies, they involve crazy things. You have to do some crazy stuff to get over hurdles, because they're hard. So the things you need to do need to be hard. There's no simple formula. So we started working on Monument in 2018, and we ran our beta in 2020 in January, and we needed 50 people. Oh, this is a great story, actually. Forgot about this. We needed 50 people. That was the agreement at the board level, to sign up not just for the platform, but paid treatment. And then we would do a full rollout, right? So we set out, we're operating the state of New York. I hired a very fancy, expensive healthcare attorney, right? To evaluate, in healthcare, you don't mess around. Everything. If you don't have a good lawyer, it ended up being a wonderful lawyer, by the way. Just a little hiccup at the beginning. We still use them. But everything needs to be by the books, right? There's no gray area. You always are in the clean area. Yeah. So we check the licenses, and this is a brand, this is new, right? The licenses for states say the floors need to be clean. We're in the cloud. So we kind of get clearance to go in New York and kind of launch our beta. And, I guess it was kind of don't do anything big or whatever. I'm I need to get these 50 people. Of course, I'm going to do something big. So I started by putting my own story out, right? I wanted to just put it. No one really knew my story. That got some adoption, but not to 50. So I honestly put a billboard above Penn Station or something. I did. And we got thrown out of the state of New York in February. Totally kicked out because we didn't have the right license, which was the only...
Because of this billboard?
Because of this billboard, and because there was one license that we needed that we didn't have. And I was so upset with these attorneys, I can't even begin to tell you, right? So we went to Florida, where, by the way, apparently you can do anything in Florida. And I'm thinking to myself, this is safe medication. It's virtual. Why are we not allowed to help people? I know it works. It's not like we're one of those companies prescribing addictive substances. We're not doing any of that. We're helping. And, it didn't make sense. And that's just the world we live in. I went down to Florida. We had no strategy there. And we literally got 0 customers. I think we were stuck at like 8. And I'm like, I'm never going to launch this thing. And COVID was happening. And, the attorneys were kind of helping us back in New York. And I guess what happened was like, I'm not sure when it happened. Maybe it was in November. I might be a few months behind. But ultimately, we're heading into quarantine. And New York called us and said, you're good. They got really focused on COVID and everything. And people were starting to drink a lot. So they waived us. We came back into New York. We got to 50 customers. At this point, it was like probably May or June when we officially launched, and everybody kind of went their own way. Now we're in quarantine. There's nobody on the streets. Yeah. And I have to launch this company. And I've spent a lot of money now because I had a reroute of months to a state where I wasn't planning to be that didn't move us forward. So my burn was high. So I literally started calling billboard owners. I told my board, I'm going to get $100 million for free advertising. I'm going to call these billboard owners, and I had someone helping me, and I'm going to give them what I called the murderer speech. I'm going to basically say, listen, no one's buying your advertising. There's no one on the street, right? I got on Good Morning America talking about Monument. I send them a link. I'd be like, we are here. We can reach the entire country. I was waiving costs of therapist moderated support groups. I gave them away for free. I was supposed to charge that at cost. I'm like, I'm doing this for free. Since it's therapist moderated support groups, we can reach people all over the country. State by state, we have to go with the actual treatment. Right. But, you can, I was basically, listen, I understand if you want to let that sit empty. But if you do, I promise you there's people that would have seen our billboard, that would have tried Monument, and those people might not be alive because of you. I'm telling you, I had 350 billboards donated. One of my billboards, this is the craziest thing ever. There's articles on it. Right when you come through the Midtown Tunnel, you'll see a Monument billboard. It's like an Apple level billboard, right? You're stuck in traffic. It's on the building right in front of you. That was gifted to me 2.5 years ago. And something happened during my 60-day free period where the building was sold or it's swapped. It's still sitting there. It's $2.8 million worth of free advertising.
That's great.
I remember the peak was I was getting inbound cold emails from people asking about the opportunity to give me free advertising. It went viral. I was recording radio ads from my closet at my beach house. I was on the radio. I was everywhere. Free. We launched with a national, big brand level advertising campaign. And we had to stop because we ran out of money we were spending to make the creative because we weren't buying any ad space. And that's how Monument went. It went whoosh.
Paper.
Yeah. And then we grew like crazy. And then whoosh, the biggest churn you've ever seen in your life after 3 months. I figured out how to fix it after that. And then from there, it's been.
That's a great example of Winston Churchill said, never waste a good crisis. And it's a good example of taking advantage of COVID. I assume they got a lot of goodwill out of it and probably wrote it off to some extent, right?
I'm sure. But, for me, it's like it worked because I know Monument was going to help people, So I'm not there selling something. I'm selling something that if we get in front of the right people, it's going to change the course of their lives. Yeah. Maybe save their lives. Yeah. So, I think that was genuine in how I delivered it. And people, like I said, everybody's affected in some way. Yeah. A lot of good people out there. I guess the moral of the story is a lot of good people.
Yeah. We got time. Do you want to do one more? You want to talk about Tilt and the parties?
Oh, maybe we do this episode 2 because I have.
We'll do the Monument.
Jordan, I can give you material for that. That might make this the #1 most viewed thing on the internet.
Well,
if anyone ever sees it.
Debut in March to Tilt because that'll be fun for the talent to hear how it got done.
Yeah, a lot of them know they were part of it, but I think some people probably. I think when Tilt gets big, 10 billion, 100 billion, it's like the Wolf of Wall Street meets The Social Network.
That's great. That's a good tee up.
Yeah.
All right, we'll end it there. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate you spending time.
Thank you for having me, Sean. You're the best.
Cut.
How we do?
Good. I think you did great. I love just the conversation. I think there's nice and fluid.
It'd be very inspiring for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. All right. I don't do many interviews, but we left a cliffhanger too, which is good. Get people back to part 2.
That's it.